Have you ever had that unsettling feeling, the kind that crawls up your spine and whispers that something is deeply, irrevocably wrong, even when everything around you seems perfectly normal? Imagine settling into your usual evening routine, the comforting hum of domesticity filling the air, the gentle clatter of dishes being put away, the low murmur of your child's bedtime story echoing from down the hall, the soft glow of the living room lamp offering a warm solace against the encroaching night. This is the kind of story that makes you check your locks twice before going to bed. So, before the story truly begins, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, why not tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now? Now, lock the door and turn off the lights, turn up the volume and pay attention. Maybe you're not as alone as you think. Our story begins now. Our life until that point had been undeniably, wonderfully mundane. I was Mark, a software engineer with an unremarkable career, living in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac with my wife, Sarah, and our 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Our house was a modest 2-story, with a small manicured lawn that I grudgingly maintained most weekends. We were the epitome of the average American family: stable jobs, a good school for Lily, summer vacations to the beach, and the occasional argument over whose turn it was to take out the recycling. There were no dark secrets lurking in our past, no skeletons in any closets. We had built a life on predictability and comfort, and we cherished it. Evenings were sacred. After dinner, Lily would retreat to her room for homework, then a chapter or two from whatever fantasy novel she was currently devouring. Sarah and I would often spend the time unwinding in the living room, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the quiet company of each other. It was a peaceful existence, the kind you rarely appreciate until it's violently ripped away. The first call came on a Tuesday night, sometime past 11. Sarah was already asleep, and I was still up, scrolling through an endless feed of news articles on my tablet, trying to keep my mind stimulated but not enough to postpone sleep too long. The ringtone, an old default setting I had long forgotten, cut through the silence with an unexpected sharpness. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. In this day and age, with telemarketers and automated scams, it wasn't unusual to get a call from an unfamiliar number. Usually I'd let it go to voicemail, but for some reason that night curiosity nudged me. I answered, a quiet hello escaping my lips. There was no immediate response, just a faint, static-laced hum on the other end. I was about to hang up, assuming it was a misdial or a bot, when a voice materialized. It wasn't human. It was synthesized, flat, devoid of emotion, like a text-to-speech program reading out a dire warning. Your family's peace is an illusion, the voice intoned, the words unnaturally precise, each syllable delivered with chilling deliberation. It will crumble. The walls you've built around yourselves will fall. My brow furrowed. Who is this? I demanded, a prickle of annoyance mixing with a nascent unease. There was no reply, only the continued hum, then a click as the line went dead. I stared at my phone, a sense of disbelief washing over me. It had to be a prank, some idiotic telemarketer using a voice changer, or a wrong number with a twisted sense of humor. I tried to dismiss it, to shake off the unsettling feeling, but the robotic cadence of the voice lingered in my ears. I checked the call log. No number displayed, just unknown. I tried blocking unknown numbers in my phone settings, a futile gesture I knew, but it made me feel marginally better. I went to bed, the strange encounter quickly overshadowed by the fatigue of the day, attributing it to a weird dream or an overactive imagination. A week passed without incident. The strange call faded into the background, becoming a fleeting, odd memory. I almost convinced myself I had drifted off and dreamed it. Our lives resumed their predictable rhythm. Lily had a habit of leaving her favorite stuffed animal, a worn-out teddy bear named Barnaby, on the living room couch before bed. It was a small, endearing quirk that Sarah and I often chuckled about. We were comfortable, perhaps too comfortable. Then, a Tuesday again, almost to the minute of the first call, the phone rang. Again, unknown number. My stomach tightened instantly. This wasn't a random occurrence. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the screen, a new wave of trepidation washing over me. Sarah stirred beside me. I quickly silenced the ringer and slipped out of bed, taking the call in the dimly lit hallway, my voice barely a whisper. "Hello," I whispered into the phone, my heart starting to pound. The same synthesized voice, colder this time, echoed through the receiver. "Mark, your daughter leaves Barnaby on the couch every night. Careless." My breath hitched. My blood ran cold, instantly eradicating any lingering doubt about a prank. This wasn't a wrong number. This wasn't a random threat. This was personal. This individual knew my name, knew about Lily, knew about Barnaby, knew our habits. A shiver, colder than any winter wind, traced its way down my spine. The specificity of the detail was a gut punch. My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. Was it a disgruntled former employee? A neighbor with a perverse sense of humor? But how could they know such an intimate, innocent detail? And why the menacing tone? I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. "Who is this? What do you want?" My voice was barely audible, a pathetic croak of fear. "The countdown has begun, Mark," the voice continued, ignoring my questions, its tone unsettlingly calm. "The clock ticks." Another click and the line went dead. I stood there in the silent hallway, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the empty dial tone. My mind reeled. The comfortable shell of our mundane life had been cracked, and something terrifying was seeping in. I felt an overwhelming urge to go to Lily's room, to check on her, to make sure she was safe, but I knew she was sound asleep, oblivious. I found myself questioning my own perception of reality, wondering if the stress of my job or some hidden anxiety was manifesting itself in this bizarre way. Was the voice truly robotic, or was I just so unnerved that my brain processed it that way? The ambiguity was almost as terrifying as the threat itself. I crept back into bed, but sleep was an impossibility. My eyes darted around the room, every shadow seeming to hold a hidden observer, every creak of the house a footstep. The peaceful illusion was shattered. The night stretched on, an agonizing eternity of hyper-awareness. Every tick of the alarm clock sounded like a hammer blow, counting down to something I couldn't comprehend. I lay awake, replaying the synthesized voice, the chilling specificity of Barnaby. How could anyone know that? Lily's attachment to that worn-out teddy bear was something only Sarah and I truly understood, something we often teased her about in good fun. It wasn't a detail we'd shared widely, certainly not with strangers. I tried to rationalize it, running through possibilities like a frantic hamster on a wheel. A babysitter. No, we hadn't had one in months. A mischievous friend of Lily's who had somehow overheard. Highly unlikely, given how quiet our cul-de-sac was. The more I tried to find a logical explanation, the deeper the dread settled in. When morning finally arrived, painting the bedroom with a pale, artificial light, I felt as if I hadn't slept at all. Sarah woke up, stretching beside me, oblivious. It was a conscious effort to keep my face neutral, to pretend everything was normal. I didn't want to alarm her, not yet, not until I had something more concrete, something I could explain. But the knowledge gnawed at me, a cancerous growth in the pit of my stomach. As I made coffee, the aroma, usually comforting, now seemed thin and distant. I kept glancing out the window, scanning the street, the usually friendly neighborhood now feeling subtly menacing. The mailman, a jovial man named Frank who always whistled as he walked, seemed to be observing our house a little too intently, though I knew that was just my paranoia at play. The calls continued. Not every night, but frequently enough to establish a terrifying pattern. Always unknown number. Always late, after Sarah and Lily were asleep. Always the same synthesized voice, devoid of inflection, delivering a new, horrifying piece of information that proved their impossible knowledge of our lives. One night, the voice detailed Sarah's exact movements that day, from her morning jog to the specific brand of oat milk she bought at the grocery store on her way home. "Sarah prefers the organic unsweetened," it droned. a healthy choice but futile. Another time, it was about a minor plumbing issue I had fixed that afternoon. The drip from the faucet has been silenced, Mark. A small victory soon forgotten. Each call stripped away another layer of our privacy, another illusion of safety. We were living in a glass house and someone was watching constantly. I tried everything. I changed my phone number, thinking that might be the obvious solution. It wasn't. The calls started again on the new number within 3 days. It was as if this entity knew the moment my new number was activated. I contacted my service provider. They assured me there was no way anyone could bypass the unknown number block, and they couldn't trace calls from blocked numbers anyway. They suggested it might be a malicious app on my phone, but a complete factory reset changed nothing. I even bought a burner phone, using it for a few days, but the moment I switched back to my regular phone, the calls resumed. It was like a cruel, twisted game of cat and mouse where the cat always knew my hiding spot. The psychological toll began to manifest in every aspect of my life. Sleep became a battle, a desperate attempt to snatch a few hours of oblivion before the inevitable ring. During the day, I was constantly on edge, my eyes darting, my ears straining for any whisper of a threat. Work suffered. My concentration was shot. My colleagues noticed my distraction, my increased irritability. I started installing security cameras around the house, a comprehensive system that gave me a full view of every angle. I connected them to my phone, monitoring them incessantly. Even with the cameras, I found myself questioning what they truly saw. Were there blind spots I hadn't considered? Could the caller somehow manipulate the feed, making me believe I was safe when I wasn't? The thought was absurd, but in my state of mind, no possibility was too outlandish. Sarah, bless her heart, noticed my deteriorating state. My dark circles were perpetually etched under my eyes, my usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a constant, low-level anxiety. "Mark, what's wrong?" she asked one evening, her hand gently touching my arm. "You've been so withdrawn lately, like you're carrying the weight of the world." The temptation to confide in her was overwhelming, but the fear of terrifying her, of ripping away her own sense of security, held me back. How do you tell your wife that a disembodied, robotic voice is systematically dismantling your family's peace, that it knows everything you do, that it promises your doom? She'd think I was cracking up, or worse, she'd be just as terrified as I was, and I couldn't bear to see that fear in her eyes, especially not for Lily's sake. So I feigned stress from work, mumbled about a difficult project, and tried to reassure her with a forced smile. The lie felt like a betrayal, but I felt it was necessary to protect them, to shield them from the incomprehensible horror that was slowly suffocating me. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, I was in the kitchen, making myself a chamomile tea, hoping it would calm my frayed nerves. The living room was dark, except for the soft glow of the streetlights filtering through the blinds. Sarah was in the shower. Suddenly, my phone rang. I braced myself. "Unknown number," I answered, my voice hoarse. "What do you want?" I demanded, my patience worn thin. The voice, calm as ever, responded, "Your daughter, Lily. She's humming 'Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star' in her sleep. A sweet melody, but it will soon be silenced." My blood ran cold. Lily's bedroom was upstairs at the back of the house. I had just checked on her minutes before, and she was sound asleep. How could they know she was humming? How could they even hear it? It was impossible, unless they were inside the house. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. A cold sweat drenched me. I was shaking. This wasn't just about surveillance anymore. It was about presence. This observation, this haunting detail, seemed to suggest a proximity that defied logic. I found myself thinking about the foundations of our home, the brick and mortar, the roof over our heads. What if our house wasn't the sanctuary we believed it to be, but a stage for this unseen tormentor? The comforting solidness of our home now felt like a fragile shell, easily breached. Was I losing my mind? Was this some elaborate breakdown? Or was a very real, very present danger closing in? The lines between reality and delusion blurred into a terrifying haze. The revelation that the caller knew Lily was humming in her sleep, a sound that should have been confined within the four walls of her bedroom, sent me spiraling into a new depth of terror. The implication was clear. This wasn't just someone observing our house from afar with binoculars or even through hacked security cameras. This was someone or something that had an impossible, intimate knowledge of our private moments, moments that could only be witnessed from within our home. I felt a visceral chill, a cold wave of dread that seemed to seep into my very bones. The chamomile tea, still steaming on the counter, suddenly felt like a bitter mockery of comfort. I stood frozen, grappling with the unthinkable, my mind frantically searching for any explanation, no matter how remote. Could it be a hidden microphone, a literal bug in the house? I tore through Lily's room, then the living room, searching every nook and cranny for anything suspicious, but found nothing. Not a single wire, not a tiny device, nothing. My pretense of work stress began to crumble under the sheer weight of the psychological assault. I couldn't keep it from Sarah much longer. My increasingly erratic behavior, the constant checking of locks, the late-night patrols of the house, the way I flinched at every unexpected noise, was becoming impossible to conceal. One morning, Sarah found me in the living room at 3 a.m., staring at the blank TV screen, a cold cup of coffee beside me. My eyes were bloodshot, my face gaunt. She sat beside me, her touch gentle but firm. "Mark, you're scaring me," she said, her voice soft but laced with concern. "Please tell me what's going on. We can face anything together." Her unwavering support, even in the face of my unexplained fear, was a moment of stark clarity. I knew then that I couldn't carry this burden alone anymore. I took a deep breath, the confession a bitter taste in my mouth. I started from the first call, detailing the chilling progression of the threats, the impossible knowledge of our private lives, the Barnaby incident, the specific details of her grocery run, the plumbing repair, and finally, the utterly terrifying detail about Lily humming in her sleep. As I spoke, her face shifted from concern to disbelief, then slowly, terrifyingly, to a mirroring of my own fear. Her eyes widened, her hand flew to her mouth. When I finished, the silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic thumping of my own frantic heart. "Mark," she whispered, her voice barely audible, That's insane. Are you sure you're not imagining things?" The question stung, but I understood it. It was an involuntary defense mechanism against something so utterly irrational. But then she remembered the incident with Barnaby. "Wait," she said, her eyes widening further. "I remember that night. You were so quiet and you kept checking Lily's room. I thought you were just being protective." A dawning horror spread across her face as the pieces began to click into place for her. The ambiguity of her own perception mirrored mine, but the undeniable facts of the calls quickly dispelled her initial doubt. From that moment on, our lives became a waking nightmare for both of us. Sarah, once the epitome of calm, became as constantly on edge as I was. We went to the police, desperate for help. We laid out the entire story, from the anonymous calls to the impossible knowledge, the specifics, the escalating threats. The officer, a kind-faced veteran named Detective Miller, listened patiently, nodding occasionally, but his expression remained guarded. He took notes, asked probing questions, but the underlying skepticism was palpable. He explained that anonymous calls were incredibly difficult to trace, especially with unknown number blocking. He suggested it was likely a sophisticated prank, perhaps from someone we knew, or even a disgruntled former acquaintance with a twisted sense of humor. He talked about swatting and stalking, and suggested we get a restraining order, but against whom? We had no name, no face, no real lead. He promised to look into it, but the way he said it, I knew it meant nothing much would come of it. The lack of physical evidence, the sheer absurdity of a voice knowing Lily's sleeping habits made us sound like a couple of paranoid lunatics. We walked out of the police station feeling more alone and vulnerable than ever. The system, designed to protect, was powerless against this unseen, unheard threat. We felt like prisoners in our own home. Every shadow seemed to lengthen. Every creak of the house sounded like a footstep. We started sleeping with Lily in our bed, just to have her close, to reassure ourselves of her presence, even though it offered no real comfort against an invisible enemy. We locked all windows and doors, double and triple checking them. I even installed extra deadbolts and a chain lock on the front door, something I never thought I would do in our quiet neighborhood. The security cameras were now streaming to a dedicated monitor in the living room, a constant vigil against a void. We ate meals in silence, conversations reduced to hushed whispers about potential escape routes or what they might do next. Our once vibrant home had transformed into a cage, a place of constant fear and anxiety. Lily, sensing our distress, began to ask questions. "Mommy, why do you keep checking the doors? Daddy, why do you look so tired?" We tried to reassure her, inventing stories about noisy neighbors or a new work project, but her innocent questions only twisted the knife deeper. The calls continued, becoming more menacingly personal, more specific. One night the voice said, "Lily's favorite pink ballet shoes are under her bed, Mark. They won't be needed much longer." That was it. That was the line. Lily had indeed left her ballet shoes under her bed that very morning, a small act of childish forgetfulness. The precise detail, the casual way it was delivered, coupled with the chilling implication, sent a wave of icy fury through me, overriding the fear for a fleeting moment. I gripped the phone so hard I thought it would crack. This was no longer just about threats. It was about the imminent danger to my daughter, a direct, undeniable assault on the most vulnerable part of our family. The ambiguity of who was behind this and their methods was maddening, but the clarity of their intent was terrifyingly real. What kind of person or thing would torture a family this way? The police couldn't help. We were on our own. We had to protect our daughter. We had to escape. The only path forward was to run, to disappear, to vanish off the face of the earth, if only we knew where to go. The ballet shoe comment was the breaking point. The casual, almost derisive tone with which the synthesized voice delivered the threat, coupled with the intimate detail of Lily's forgotten shoes, solidified a terrifying truth. This wasn't just harassment or an attempt to scare us. This was a prelude to something far more sinister. The fear, which had been a creeping dread, now morphed into a primal, protective rage. My hands trembled as I hung up the phone, not from fear, but from a desperate, consuming need to act. We couldn't rely on the police. We couldn't outsmart an enemy that seemed to know our every move, every thought, every forgotten item under our child's bed. Our only option, as terrifying as it was, seemed to be to disappear. The next morning we made a plan. A desperate, hastily constructed strategy born of pure panic. We would pack only essentials, leave notes for work and school, and drive to a remote cabin owned by Sarah's aunt, hundreds of miles away in a secluded, mountainous region. It was a place with no cellular service, no internet, just the vast, silent wilderness. We reasoned that if the caller relied on technology or surveillance, going completely off-grid might offer a temporary sanctuary. It was a gamble, but we had no other choice. Sarah was a whirlwind of frantic energy, compiling lists, while I tried to maintain a semblance of calm for Lily, explaining it as a sudden, exciting adventure trip. Lily, innocent and trusting, was initially thrilled by the prospect of a spontaneous journey. I watched her bright eyes innocent and full of wonder, and the resolve hardened within me. I would do anything, absolutely anything, to protect her. As we packed, every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside sounded like an approaching threat. I felt like a hunted animal, constantly scanning my surroundings, my nerves frayed to their absolute limit. We moved with a silent, almost conspiratorial urgency. I found myself thinking about the fundamental human need for safety, for a place where one can truly let their guard down. The idea that our own home, our sanctuary, had been violated in such an insidious way was a wound that refused to heal. It was a violation of the most basic sense of security and trust. We loaded the car under the cloak of pre-dawn darkness, the streets silent and empty, save for the occasional twitch of movement from a nocturnal creature. The air was cold, a biting reminder of the chilling reality we were fleeing. Just as I was about to close the trunk, my phone, which I had deliberately silenced, vibrated in my pocket. Unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat. They knew. They always knew. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then answered, my voice a strained whisper. "What do you want?" The familiar synthesized voice, calm and utterly devoid of emotion, replied, "Running is futile, Mark. The journey will only prolong the inevitable. You are driving a blue Toyota Camry, license plate G5C80. Why, your daughter's pink backpack is visible in the back seat. Is she excited for the mountains?" My blood ran cold. My own car, the license plate, Lily's pink backpack, her excitement for the mountains. The details were devastatingly accurate, delivered in real time. This wasn't just a phone call anymore. It was a direct taunt, a demonstration of omnipresent surveillance. They weren't just watching our house, they were watching us everywhere. The fear escalated to a primal scream trapped in my throat. I slammed the phone shut, my hands shaking so violently I could barely grip the steering wheel. "Drive, Sarah, now," I yelled, my voice cracking. Sarah, her face ashen, didn't question me. She started the car, tires squealing as we sped away from our home, from our neighborhood, from the increasingly oppressive reality. As we drove, the reality of our situation settled in like a suffocating blanket. Every car that passed us, every shadow that fell across the road made us jump. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, convinced I would see a phantom car following us, but there was never anything there. It was psychological warfare, expertly executed. The caller didn't need to physically follow us. The mere suggestion that they could was enough to keep us in a constant state of terror. We drove for hours, making desperate, unscheduled turns, hoping to lose any potential tail, but knowing deep down it was futile. We felt completely exposed, like fish in a barrel. We were just driving away from a place, not from a threat. And the ambiguity of whether this caller was a human being with extraordinary resources or something else entirely was almost as crushing as the fear itself. The lines between the known and the unknown blurred into a terrifying, indistinguishable mess. We eventually reached the remote cabin as dusk began to settle, painting the sky with bruised purples and oranges. It was a rustic, isolated structure, surrounded by thick forest and miles from the nearest town. There was no electricity, only a generator, and no running water, only a well. The silence was absolute, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves in the wind. No phone signal, no Wi-Fi. It was exactly what we needed, or so we hoped. We spent the first few hours meticulously checking every window, every door, every inch of the perimeter. I even climbed onto the roof, looking for anything out of place. We lit a fire in the hearth, its flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, providing a small measure of warmth and comfort in the vast, intimidating darkness. For the first time in weeks, the crushing weight of impending doom eased, if only slightly. We felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we had found a loophole, a momentary respite from the relentless tormentor. Lily, exhausted from the long drive and the excitement of the adventure, fell asleep almost immediately, curled up on a makeshift bed near the fireplace. Sarah and I sat by the fire, holding hands, listening to the comforting crackle of the flames. The silence was unnerving at first, so different from the constant hum of our suburban life, but it slowly began to feel like a balm. We allowed ourselves a moment of cautious optimism. Maybe we had finally outrun them. Then, in the dead of night, as the fire dwindled to embers and the cabin was plunged into near-total darkness, a sound split the oppressive silence. Not a phone ringing because there was no signal, not a knock at the door because we had bolted everything shut. It was a faint, almost imperceptible sound, yet it was undeniably present, cutting through the stillness. A synthesized voice, familiar in its chill, flat tone, whispered through the thin wooden walls, as if it was right outside the window. "You thought you were safe here, Mark. The forest has eyes and ears, and now so do you." The synthesized whisper cutting through the absolute silence of the remote cabin was a blow that stole the air from my lungs. It wasn't a phone call. It couldn't be. There was no signal, no way. Yet the voice was unmistakable, chillingly clear, as if spoken directly into my ear. You thought you were safe here, Mark. The forest has eyes and ears, and now so do you. The words hung in the frigid air, each syllable a hammer blow against my fragile sense of security. Sarah gasped beside me, her hand clamping over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror in the faint glow of the dying embers. Lily, mercifully, remained asleep, oblivious to the fresh nightmare unfurling around her. The cabin, which moments ago had felt like a sanctuary, now became the most terrifying cage imaginable. It was clear then, this wasn't about technology or surveillance cameras. This was something else entirely, something that defied logic and reason. This was absolute, pervasive knowledge, a presence that seemed to transcend all physical barriers. The full, horrifying weight of the situation landed on me then. There was no escape. A terrifying thought, born of pure desperation, bloomed in my mind. If there was no escaping them, then perhaps the only way to protect my family was to confront them. The thought was reckless, suicidal even, but the alternative, living in perpetual helpless terror, was unimaginable. The very next morning, despite Sarah's pleas, I made a decision. I had to find out who or what this was. I had to face it. I packed a small bag with a few essentials, including my old, fully charged burner phone. I told Sarah I was going to the nearest town, a tiny dot on the map called Oakhaven, to try and get a signal, to call the police again, to find any kind of help. It was a partial truth. I intended to do that, but my primary goal was to draw the caller out, to force their hand. I knew it was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but I couldn't sit there, waiting for the axe to fall. The lingering ambiguity of the caller's true nature still gnawed at me. Was this a person, a collective, or something supernatural? The question was a terrifying open wound. I drove back the way we came, leaving Sarah and Lily at the cabin, promising to be back before nightfall. The drive was a blur, my mind racing, constructing and deconstructing theories. Oakhaven was even smaller than I remembered. A sleepy hamlet with a single gas station, a general store, and a tiny sheriff's office. I bought a map, a fresh battery pack for my phone, and a local newspaper. The newspaper, a thin, weekly publication, was mostly filled with local gossip and high school sports scores. As I sat in the gas station parking lot, attempting to get a signal on my burner phone, I scanned the headlines. Nothing unusual. It was a normal, quiet town. I then decided to push my luck. I walked into the sheriff's office. The deputy behind the desk looked bored. I explained my situation again, this time focusing on the most recent incident at the cabin, the clear, unexplainable voice. He just shook his head. Look, mister, people get paranoid out in the woods. Wild animals, the wind, the isolation. It plays tricks on you. He advised me to go home and get some rest. I felt a cold surge of frustration, but also a strange clarity. The authorities were useless. This was my fight. As I stepped out of the sheriff's office, my burner phone rang. Unknown number. This time, I didn't hesitate. I answered, my voice steady, my heart pounding a furious rhythm. You want me? Here I am. What do you want? I demanded, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. The synthesized voice was there, instantly, chillingly clear. Patience, Mark, the game is not over. You are in Oakhaven outside the sheriff's office. You are wearing a gray hoodie. The gas station attendant just waved at you, didn't he? Small town. My blood ran cold. The details were immediate, irrefutable. I looked across the street at the gas station. The attendant was indeed just turning back inside after waving to a customer. My gray hoodie. They were watching me right now. A terrifying thought jolted through me. What if the anomaly wasn't just the caller, but the way our lives intersected with them? What if the caller was only truly present when the calls were made, an entity that could bend reality during those precise moments? The theory was tenuous, desperate, but it offered a sliver of explanation for the impossible surveillance. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice raw. "Show yourself." "Soon," the voice replied, its tone as flat and emotionless as ever. "But first, a final test. Go to the abandoned mill a mile north of town on Miller's Creek Road. There you will find what you seek and what you fear." Another click. The line went dead. The abandoned mill. I knew the place. It was an old, dilapidated structure, long disused and rumored to be haunted by locals. It was a place where people went to drink, to spray graffiti, or to dare each other to enter on Halloween. It was also completely isolated. This was it. This was the confrontation. My mind raced, trying to anticipate what I would find there. A person, a hidden camera, a trap. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn back, to drive away, to go back to Sarah and Lily and simply vanish from the face of the earth. But the thought of never knowing, of living with that lingering threat over my family, was unbearable. This was my chance, however terrifying, to put an end to it. This was the hunter becoming the hunted, but I was fully aware that the hunter might just be leading me to my own execution. I drove towards the mill, the short drive feeling like an eternity. The road quickly turned from paved to gravel, then to a dirt track, winding through overgrown fields and dense woods. The air grew colder, the trees seemed to lean in, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. The old mill loomed into view, a decaying husk of weathered wood and rusting metal, its broken windows like empty eyes staring out from a hollow skull. A sense of overwhelming dread washed over me, but I pushed through it. This was for Sarah. This was for Lily. This was for our freedom. I parked the car a safe distance away, out of sight from the main track, and began to approach the mill on foot. The wind whistled through the broken panes, creating a mournful, almost human moan. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. As I got closer, I noticed something faint, almost imperceptible, emanating from one of the darkened windows. A faint, almost rhythmic electronic hum, the kind of sound a server or a complex piece of machinery might make. This wasn't some supernatural being. This was technological, after all. Or was it? The hum resonated with the unsettling stillness of the place, adding another layer to the unnerving ambiguity. The faint electronic hum emanating from the dilapidated mill was both a relief and a fresh wave of terror. It meant this wasn't some spectral entity, some impossible supernatural force. It was technological. It was human. And that meant it could be stopped. But it also meant I was walking into a very real, very dangerous trap. I moved cautiously, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The broken windows of the mill seemed to watch me, 1,000 vacant eyes reflecting the dim afternoon light filtering through the dense tree line. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying wood, and an unsettling metallic tang. Every step echoed loudly in the stillness, amplifying my own anxious breath. I circled the building, looking for an entry point, my eyes scanning for any sign of movement, any hidden camera, any hint of who might be inside. The hum grew louder as I approached a boarded-up door on the side of the mill. One of the planks was loose, offering a narrow gap. I peered through, my eyes adjusting to the gloom within. The interior was vast and empty, dust motes dancing in the shafts of light that pierced the decaying roof. And then I saw it. In the center of the main floor, surrounded by piles of rotting machinery, was a makeshift setup. A generator, several blinking servers, a series of complex-looking monitors, and what appeared to be an array of sophisticated audio equipment. The hum originated from here. This was the source. This was the voice. My blood ran cold again, but this time, it was mixed with a surge of adrenaline-fueled determination. I pushed the loose board aside, creating an opening just wide enough for me to slip through. The air inside was stale, heavy, and carried the faint, acrid smell of ozone from the electronics. I crept forward, my footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust and debris. As I got closer, the screens on the monitors flickered, displaying what looked like code, data streams, and then, horrifyingly, a live feed of our cabin. I could see Sarah, a small figure moving inside by the dying fire. My stomach lurched. They had somehow established surveillance there too, despite the remote location. This wasn't just a local operation. This was something far more elaborate, far more insidious than I could have ever imagined. And then I saw the figure. Not a person hiding, but a person sitting calmly in a worn office chair, their back to me, facing the monitors. They were completely still, seemingly absorbed in the data scrolling across the screens. My breath hitched. This was it, the culmination of weeks of terror, the face of the nightmare. I raised my phone, ready to record, to capture evidence, to finally expose this monster. As I took one more step, the individual turned their head slowly, as if sensing my presence. It wasn't a sudden, startled movement, but a deliberate, almost graceful turn. My jaw dropped. It wasn't a stranger. It was Frank, our unassuming, jovial mailman. Frank, the friendly mailman who always whistled. The man who had passed our house countless times, delivering our mail, seemingly just another part of the mundane backdrop of our lives. My mind reeled. It was impossible, unthinkable. How could he be behind this? My initial shock quickly morphed into a profound, gut-wrenching betrayal. "Frank," I whispered, my voice raw with disbelief and rage. He smiled. It wasn't Frank's usual affable grin, but something cold, unsettling, almost predatory. His eyes, usually twinkling, were dead, devoid of warmth. "Hello, Mark," he said, and the voice that came out of his mouth was the synthesized voice, perfectly articulated, utterly emotionless. "Welcome, I knew you'd come." My entire body went rigid. It wasn't a trick. He wasn't using a device. The voice was coming from him. My mind struggled to process this. Was he a robot? Was this some kind of advanced AI? A person with a synthetic voice box. The ambiguity was terrifying. "Why?" I choked out, 1,000 questions warring in my mind, but that one word encompassed them all. He tilted his head slightly, like a curious child observing an ant. "Why? Because I can. Because I seek understanding. Because your fear, Mark, is a beautiful thing. A pure, unadulterated essence." He gestured vaguely at the screens. "Your family's patterns, their reactions to calculated pressure, their breaking points. It's all so fascinating. A complex algorithm of human behavior under duress." He spoke of us not as people, but as subjects, data points in some twisted experiment. He called it optimizing the fear response. This was not about revenge or money or a personal vendetta. It was a cold, clinical study of human suffering. My fear, for a fleeting moment, vanished, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. "You sick bastard!" I roared, lunging forward, my hands extended, wanting to tear him apart. But before I could reach him, he moved with impossible speed, a blur of motion. He wasn't human. He was impossibly fast, impossibly strong. He grabbed my arm, his grip like steel, twisting it behind my back with casual ease. I cried out, a sharp, involuntary gasp of pain. He dragged me towards one of the monitors, forcing my face close to the screen displaying Sarah and Lily. "Observe, Mark," the synthesized voice whispered directly into my ear. "The ripple effect. Your terror, radiating outwards. A perfect cascade." He released me suddenly, and I stumbled back, clutching my aching arm, my eyes fixed on him. A creature that looked human but was anything but. "The experiment is concluded, Mark," he said, turning back to his monitors, his back to me once more. "The data collected is sufficient. You have served your purpose." I stood there, gasping, my mind reeling. The experiment, the data. It was all a game to him, a game that had nearly destroyed my family. I had to end this. I scanned the room desperately for anything, a weapon, a tool, anything I could use. My eyes landed on a heavy, rusted pipe lying on the floor. With a renewed burst of adrenaline, I snatched it up, raising it high above my head, and swung it with all my might towards his head. The pipe connected with a sickening thud, a metallic clang that reverberated through the mill. But it wasn't the soft, fleshy sound I expected. He didn't fall. He didn't even flinch. He slowly turned, his face completely unmarked, an almost imperceptible dent in the pipe itself. He merely looked at me, his synthetic voice echoing through the vast space. Inefficient, he stated, and then faster than I could react, he was on me. The last thing I remembered was a crushing blow to my head, and then oblivion. My final thought was not of pain, but of the chilling ambiguity of his words and actions. Was he simply a highly specialized human, or something far beyond? I woke up hours later, lying in the cold, damp dust of the mill floor. My head throbbed, a dull, insistent ache that pulsed with every beat of my heart. The room was empty. The monitors were black, the servers silent. The hum was gone. Frank, or whatever he was gone. It was as if he had never been there, leaving only the lingering smell of ozone and the heavy weight of what had transpired. I stumbled out of the mill, my body bruised, my mind fragmented. I made my way back to the car and drove, almost mechanically, back to the cabin. Sarah rushed out, relief washing over her face as she saw me, but her relief quickly turned to concern as she took in my battered appearance. I told her everything, the whole unbelievable, horrifying truth about Frank. She listened, her face pale, her eyes wide. We didn't talk much after that. We just held each other, the unspoken terror a palpable presence between us. We packed our small bags again silently and drove away from the cabin, away from Oak Haven, away from everything. We moved to a new state, changed our names, started new lives, as far removed from our past as possible. Lily surprisingly adapted quickly, her young mind resilient, though sometimes she still asks about her old friends or draws pictures of a stern-looking mailman with glowing eyes. We tell her he was just a bad man, a bully. But the truth is far more unsettling. The calls stopped completely. After that day at the mill, not a single anonymous ring, not a whisper of a threat, but the silence is almost worse. It's not the peace we once knew. It's a haunted silence, filled with the echoes of a synthesized voice, the phantom hum of unseen machines, and the chilling, unanswerable questions. Was Frank human? Was he an advanced prototype? A new species of predator, evolving in the shadows of our technological age? I still don't know. The police still have no answers, no leads, no interest. We live our lives under this new skin, always looking over our shoulders, always listening, always scanning the faces in the crowd. Sometimes when a stranger gives me a brief knowing look, or when the mailman walks by with an unusual gait, a cold shiver runs down my spine. The fear never truly leaves. It just changes shape, subtly, insidiously, a constant whisper in the back of my mind. Because you see, the experiment might be over for him, but for us, the knowledge, the terror, the fundamental shift in our perception of safety, it's a forever haunting. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I can still hear the faint, almost imperceptible hum of those machines, just beyond the reach of my hearing, still collecting data.